My mother rang on a Wednesday morning, and by the time I set the phone down, I understood that my son had just made the most costly mistake of his life. My name is Gerald Whitmore. I spent 34 years working as a building inspector for the Wellington City Council, which means I have spent the better part of my adult life walking through other people's structures and finding exactly where they were about to fail. Foundations that looked solid from the street, beams that had been quietly rotting for a decade, walls that held up perfectly fine until the first real pressure came. What surprises you, eventually, is how long people manage to hold the illusion together before it all comes down. I live in Lower Hutt now, in the house where I raised my son, and I had been standing in my kitchen making toast when the phone rang. It was 8:15 on a Wednesday, and my mother does not ring at 8:15 on a Wednesday unless something has already gone wrong. Welcome to Silver Verdict. Stay with me on this one. The people in this story had every opportunity to do the right thing. They simply chose not to. Mum. I picked up immediately. Her name is Iris Whitmore. She is 79 years old and she lives alone in the house in Petone where I grew up. The same house she and my father moved into in 1968. The same house where she still tends a garden that wins the admiration of everyone on her street and the quiet envy of a few. She does not own a smartphone. She still writes letters. She keeps a record of every significant conversation she has ever had in a set of green notebooks stacked in the top drawer of her writing desk. I mention this because it becomes relevant. Gerald, she said. Not hello. Not good morning. Just my name. The way she used to say it when I was 16, and she already knew what I had done before I opened my mouth. I put down my toast. What's happened? Did Owen's graduation dinner already take place? And there it was. I set the plate down slowly. Owen is my grandson. He is 22 years old, and he has just completed his degree in civil engineering at Victoria University. My son Brendan and his wife Melissa had been planning a dinner for months. A proper celebration, they said. Family, close friends. The Rongotai Golf Club function room, where Melissa had already spoken to the event's coordinator. I had assumed I would receive an invitation in the ordinary way. I had assumed Iris would as well. She had helped Owen with his year 13 maths when he was struggling and still talked about it with pride. She had driven to every one of his school prize givings. She had earned her seat at that table without question. I think it was last Saturday, I said carefully. Why are you asking? Nobody rang me, Gerald. I rang Brendan myself this morning to ask whether the date had been confirmed. He went quiet. Then Melissa came on the line and she said, very pleasantly, "Oh, Iris, the dinner was last weekend. We thought you'd find the drive a bit much." I stood very still in my kitchen. She thought I'd find the drive a bit much, Mum repeated. Petone, to Rongotai, 12 minutes on a good day. I know, I said. I know. There was a pause on the line and I heard Iris do something I had not heard her do in a very long time. She exhaled slowly, the way a person exhales when they are keeping something much larger than a breath inside their chest. Then she said, "I think you should ring your son." I rang Brendan before I had finished my coffee. He answered on the second ring, too quickly, the way a person answers when they have been expecting the call and have been dreading it in equal measure. "Why wasn't your grandmother at Owen's graduation dinner?" Silence. The particular silence of a man doing arithmetic. "Dad." It was mostly Owen's mates, university friends, colleagues from his internship. It wasn't really a family occasion. "She lives 12 minutes away," I said. She taught him integration and differentiation when his school tutor gave up. She is 79 years old, and she has never once missed something that mattered to that boy. I know, but Melissa thought, and then I heard it. In the background, quiet and precise, Melissa's voice. The tone of someone directing traffic from off stage. Certain. The driver will follow the signs. We'll come round, Brendan said finally. This weekend. We want to explain properly. Brendan. Please, Dad. This weekend. He rang off. I stood in the kitchen in Lower Hutt with cold toast and that old familiar weight in my chest, the one I had learned to recognize over 34 years of inspecting other people's structures. The weight that meant I was already looking at a crack that ran much deeper than the surface suggested. I rang Iris back. They want to come round this weekend, I told her, to explain in person. She made a sound I know well. It is not a laugh. It is not quite amusement. It is the sound of a woman who has already read to the end of the chapter and is waiting to see how long it takes you to catch up. Gerald, she said, I need to tell you something, but I'd prefer to tell you in person. Can you come for lunch tomorrow? I drove to Petone on Thursday morning. Iris had made a pot of her good soup, the one with leeks and kumara that she only makes when she wants to think clearly. She says, because chopping vegetables settles the mind. We sat at the table where I had eaten every breakfast of my childhood, and she told me everything. She had not been idle since Wednesday morning. That was the first thing I needed to understand. While I had been standing in my kitchen processing what she told me, Iris Whitmore had already been moving. On Wednesday afternoon, she told me, she had rung her friend Patricia Holden. Patricia is 81 years old, a retired family court solicitor, and she has known Iris since they were both young women in the Petone Residents Association in 1974. They have lunch together every fortnight, without fail. Patricia, it turned out, had some interesting information. Patricia's daughter works in mortgage broking, Iris said, cutting a piece of bread with the precise economy of motion she applies to everything. And Patricia mentioned something to me back in August that I filed away. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now I think quite a lot of it. What did she say? She said that Melissa had rung her daughter, professionally, inquiring about the process of having a family member's assets assessed for management purposes. The phrasing Patricia used was assessed for management purposes. Her daughter had thought it a strange inquiry and mentioned it to Patricia. Patricia had mentioned it to me. I put my spoon down. At the time, Iris continued, I assumed it was general curiosity. Perhaps they were looking at options for care planning, which would have been a reasonable thing to consider. But Gerald, she set her own spoon down with that small, quiet click that means she has arrived somewhere. I have been thinking about this since Wednesday, and I no longer believe that is what it was. Who was at Owen's graduation dinner? I asked. The whole list. Iris reached into the pocket of her cardigan and produced a piece of paper. She had written it down. Of course she had written it down. Owen's university friends, she said. Brendan and Melissa. Melissa's parents, who flew up from Christchurch. Owen's flatmate and his girlfriend, and a woman named Carolyn Steed, who Iris had identified through Patricia's professional network as a financial administrator who specializes in what is legally described as supported decision-making for elderly or incapacitated persons. The room was very quiet. Outside, a tui was working through the cowhide in the front garden. Ordinary Thursday sounds on an ordinary Petone street. Carolyn Steed, I said. Patricia knew the name immediately, Iris said. She said Miss Steed has a particular practice. She works with families who believe a relative may no longer be managing their own affairs competently. I pressed both hands flat on the table. Mom! They brought her to Owen's graduation dinner. Yes, without telling you. Yes. Melissa rang me the following Monday, Iris said. The day after the dinner. Very warm, very friendly. She asked whether I had thought any more about moving somewhere with a bit more support. When I said I was perfectly happy where I was, she said she understood, but that the family had some concerns and that there were options worth considering. And then she mentioned, very gently, that there might be some value in having someone professional take a look at how I was managing things. Managing things, I repeated. My finances, Gerald. The house. The accounts your father left. My father, Colin Whitmore, had been a quantity surveyor. He had died 11 years ago, and he had left behind, quietly and without drama, the kind of careful, modest wealth that accumulates over a lifetime of working steadily and spending sensibly. The Petone house, paid off. Some investments managed through a firm in Wellington. A small trust established for grandchildren's education. None of it was dramatic. None of it was ostentatious. But it was there. And it was Iris's. And she had managed it without any difficulty whatsoever for 11 years. "Does Brendan know?" I asked. Iris looked at me for a moment. "That is the question," she said. "I genuinely do not know. I made some calls that week. Quiet ones. I have a friend from my council days, a man named Stuart Ing, who spent 20 years in property law before he moved to a smaller firm. I rang him on Thursday afternoon and explained what I knew. He listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I have always valued about Stuart. And when I finished, he asked 3 questions and then told me to bring Iris in on Monday. Iris had, as it turned out, already been in contact with someone of her own. This is the thing about my mother that I keep forgetting. Despite a lifetime of evidence, she does not wait to be rescued. She was already in motion before I knew there was anything to be in motion about. She told me on Friday, when I rang to confirm the Monday appointment with Stuart. She listened politely to what I had arranged, thanked me, and then told me she had already spoken to a woman named Ruth Parada, who had been referred to her by Patricia Holden, and who was a Wellington-based estate solicitor of some standing. Iris had rung her on Wednesday afternoon, the same afternoon she had first spoken to Patricia. She had gone into Ruth's office on Thursday morning while I was still standing in my kitchen in Lower Hutt, trying to decide whether I was overreacting. "You went on your own?" I asked. "I'm 79, Gerald, not 9. I caught the 83 bus. It was perfectly straightforward." "Mum." Ruth was very helpful, Iris said. "We had a thorough conversation. I answered her questions, and she answered mine. And by the time I left, we had a clear picture of the situation and a clear plan for what to do about it." "What kind of plan?" "The kind that means Carolyn Steed's involvement becomes entirely unnecessary," Iris said pleasantly. "Ruth is making some adjustments to my estate documents this week. She is also arranging for me to have a full cognitive assessment through my GP. I have an appointment with Dr. Aroha Tane on Tuesday. Ruth's recommendation. Everything will be properly documented." I didn't have anything to say to that for a moment. Outside my own kitchen window, the evening was coming in off the harbor, gray and mild the way Lower Hutt evenings are in autumn. "Mum," I finally said, "how long have you been aware that something was wrong?" A pause. "The honest kind, not the evasive kind." "Since August," she said. "When Patricia first mentioned Melissa's inquiry, I didn't know what it meant then, but I kept the information. I keep everything, Gerald." "I know," I said. She had kept everything. She had kept Patricia's information, and she had kept her own counsel, and she had waited, patient and quiet, until she understood exactly what she was dealing with. And then, in the space of 72 hours, she had engaged a solicitor, initiated changes to her estate, arranged a cognitive assessment, and documented the timeline in one of her green notebooks with the date and time of every relevant conversation recorded precisely. All of this before my son and his wife arrived at my front door on Saturday afternoon. Brendan and Melissa came at 2 o'clock. They came in Melissa's car, a late-model Audi that she had driven to my driveway twice before, both times on occasions when she wanted something. I noticed the pattern only now. Brendan got out first. He looked the way men look when they have been arguing with their convictions for a week, and the convictions have been losing. There was a hollowness around his eyes that I recognized, because I had seen it in the mirror on days when I had known something was wrong at a job site and made myself believe otherwise. Melissa got out second. She was composed, as she always was, neatly dressed, careful smile, the kind of woman who has never, in my observation, walked into a room without having decided in advance what impression she intended to make. I had spent years telling myself this was simply professional habit. Standing in my driveway watching her come toward my front door, I understood that I had been too generous with myself. "Come in," I said. "I've put the jug on." We sat in the lounge. Brendan sat on the sofa. Melissa sat beside him, close enough that the positioning felt coordinated. I sat in the armchair my father had sat in, and his father before him, and I waited. "Dad," Brendan started, "we wanted to talk to you about Nan." "Dad, for mine OC, all right," I said. "We're worried about her," Melissa said. She came in smooth and certain, the handoff so practiced I could hear the preparation behind it. "She's 79, and she's in that house on her own. She's managing everything by herself. The finances, the property, and some of the decisions she's been making lately." "What decisions?" I asked. Melissa blinked. Once. A very small hesitation. There and gone. "She made a substantial donation to her church last year," Melissa said. "And she gave a sum of money to Owen for his final year that was, well, it was significant. And she didn't discuss it with anyone first." I looked at my daughter-in-law. "It's her money," I said. "She can do what she likes with it." "Of course she can," Melissa said, not missing a beat. "We're not saying otherwise. We just think she'd benefit from some support, some structure around how things are managed. For her protection, I said. "Dad," Brendan said, "we're not trying to take anything away from her. We love her. We just want to make sure she's being looked after properly." I looked at my son for a long moment. This man I had taken to every Saturday football practice for 7 years. This man I had driven to Palmerston North at 2 in the morning, the night his appendix went sideways. This man I had lent money to twice, and not once asked for it back. I looked at him, and I tried to find the place where the good intentions ended, and whatever this was began. I could not find a clear line. I think that was the most dispiriting part. "Is that why there was a financial administrator at Owen's graduation dinner?" I asked. The room changed. Not dramatically. No one knocked anything over. But the quality of the air shifted in the particular way it does when a truth has entered a space that was not designed to hold it. Melissa's smile did not disappear. It was too well constructed for that. But something tightened at the edges. A small involuntary tension. The structural equivalent of a hairline crack. "Who told you about Carolyn Steed?" she asked. Her voice was level, controlled. "Does it matter?" "It wasn't like that," Brendan said. "Carolyn is a friend of Melissa's aunt. She was just there for dinner." "A family friend," I said, "with a professional specialization in supported decision-making for elderly clients. At a family dinner to which my mother was not invited." Brendan looked at Melissa. It was a fast look, not more than a second, but I have been reading that man's face since the day he was born, and I knew what it contained. He had not known Carolyn Steed would be there. He had not known why she was there. He was finding this out at the same moment I was confirming it. I felt something loosen in my chest at that. Not relief. Something more complicated than relief. "Brendan," I said, and I kept my voice even because I wanted him to hear me clearly. He didn't answer. He looked at the carpet, then at the window, then at his hands, and that was the answer. "We are protecting the family's interests," Melissa said. "Gerald, your mother is sitting on a significant property, and a trust and liquid assets that could ensure Owen's future, that could benefit all of us. And right now there is no structure, no oversight, no..." It's her money, I said. My father earned it. She kept it. There is no situation in which what you are describing is protecting anything except your own interests. Melissa opened her mouth. I want to tell you something, I said. And I want you to listen to it carefully. She closed her mouth. I will give her this. She knew when to stop. My mother has known about your concerns since August, I said. She has known about Carolyn Steed since Tuesday. She was in the office of a Wellington estate solicitor named Ruth Parada on Thursday morning before you had decided what to wear for today. Ruth has already made changes to her estate documents. They have been filed and witnessed, and my mother has a full cognitive assessment scheduled with her GP on Tuesday, recommended by her solicitor and documented accordingly. I paused. Whatever process you were planning to initiate, it is no longer viable. Ruth made that quite clear. The silence that followed was the most complete silence I have sat in since my father died. Then Brendan said, very quietly, I looked at my son. I did not tell him it was all right. It wasn't all right. But I looked at him and I let him know that I had heard him. There is one more thing, I said. Owen. Brendan looked up. He doesn't know what that dinner was, does he? It wasn't a question. Brendan shook his head slowly. He will find out, I said. Not from me. But he's 22 years old, and he's perceptive, and he is going to work it out. And when he does, that is a conversation between the three of you and him. I can't manage that for you. I stood up. I think that's enough for today. Melissa looked as though she had a great deal more she wished to say. She said none of it. They left at 3:30. I stood at the front window and watched the Audi back out of my driveway, and I thought about my father, who had built something careful and unglamorous over a long, quiet life, and about my mother, who had maintained it with the same steadiness, and about the people who had looked at that steadiness and seen only an opportunity. Then I rang Iris. She picked up on the first ring, as she always does when she is expecting me. How did it go? She asked. About as you'd expect, I told her. Brendan didn't know the full extent of it. I'm fairly certain of that. I thought as much, she said. He's not a bad boy, Gerald. He's a decent man who has been persuaded that a bad idea was a reasonable one. That is a different thing. She was right. She was almost always right. I had simply spent too many years assuming that her rightness was a general feature of being old and wise, rather than the specific product of a very sharp mind that never stopped paying attention. What exactly did Ruth change in your documents? I asked. Iris made the sound. The particular sound, a woman's financial affairs, she said, are her own business. Mum, come for lunch on Sunday, she said. I'm making a roast. She rang off. I stood in my hallway in Lower Hutt, and I looked at the photograph on the wall beside the stairs. Iris and my father, 1971, standing in front of the Petone house the year they moved in. She was 25 years old. She is looking at the camera with an expression I have never quite been able to name. Not defiance, not pride, something quieter and more permanent. The expression of a person who knows exactly who they are and has decided that is quite enough. Sunday came with the particular Wellington quality of cold brightness. The harbor flat and silver, the hills sharp against the sky. I arrived at Birchwood Street at 12 and found the table already set. The good dishes, the cloth ironed smooth, a detail that told me she had been planning the afternoon with some care. Owen was already there. His old Corolla was in the drive, the one with the faded Victoria University sticker in the back window. I had not known he was coming. I understood, standing in the driveway, that I had not been meant to know in advance. My mother, 79 years old, had set this table the way a person sets a stage. Inside, Owen was in the kitchen helping Iris with the gravy. because that is what he has done since he was tall enough to reach the bench. Brendan looked like a man sitting a difficult exam. Melissa looked like a woman who had dressed very carefully for an occasion she did not yet understand. "Come in," Iris said over her shoulder. "Hang your coat. 15 minutes. I hung my coat. I sat down. I looked at Brendan, who looked at me, who looked at his hands. Owen carried the gravy boat to the table with the focused care of a young man who has been told once not to spill it and has never forgotten. He sat down and immediately started talking about a project he had been assigned at his engineering internship, something involving a retaining wall on the Kapiti coast that had been poorly designed 30 years ago and was now somebody else's problem. He talked with the easy energy of a person who has no idea what the afternoon is about to ask of him. Iris served the roast. She had made roast lamb, the one she does with garlic and rosemary, the one she only makes on occasions that matter to her. There were roasted parsnips and carrots, and a gravy so good that Owen asked immediately whether there was more. She asked Owen about his internship supervisor. She asked Brendan about the new project at his firm. She complimented Melissa on her earrings, which was a remark so precisely calibrated in its warmth and its ambiguity that I watched Melissa try for a moment to determine whether it was welcome or warning. The answer, as I understood it, was both. I ate, and I watched, and I kept quiet. Keeping quiet is something I am better at than people expect. It is the thing that served me for 34 years in buildings that didn't want to be examined. Then Iris set down her fork. She placed it beside her plate with a small, clean click. "Owen," she said, "I have something I'd like to give you." Owen looked up from his second helping of parsnips. "Yeah, Nan?" Iris reached into the pocket of her cardigan, the dark green one she wears to church, and produced an envelope. Cream paper, sealed. She slid it across the table. Owen put his fork down and picked it up with the slightly wary expression of a young man who suspects he is about to receive a birthday card 6 months late. Then he opened it. And I watched his face. The easy open expression he'd had all through lunch went somewhere else. What replaced it was slower, more careful. The expression of a person reading something that requires them to recalibrate. "Nan," he said. "I know what it is," she said pleasantly. "Your grandfather worked for 40 years, and he was very careful with what he earned. And you have just finished a degree that will let you build things that last. So yes, it's significant. You should use it wisely." Owen looked at his parents, then at me, then at the envelope. "There is one condition," Iris said. "It goes directly into an account in your name. Not a joint account. Yours entirely. Ruth Parada's office set it up on Thursday. The transfer is already initiated. The envelope is a formality." The table was quiet in the way that happens when something real has just been said in a room full of people managing unreal things. "I should also tell you," Iris continued, her voice still perfectly level, "that I have made some changes to my estate this week. Ruth has been very thorough. Everything has been restructured. The house, the trust your grandfather established, the accounts. It's all been reorganized in a way that Ruth assures me is quite robust." She picked up her water glass. "I have also had a cognitive assessment," she said. "Full evaluation, memory, reasoning, judgment, executive function. Dr. Aroa Tain at the Petone Medical Center. I passed," she said, and there was something in her voice then. Not pride exactly. Something more like the quiet satisfaction of a person who expected to pass and is pleased to have it on record. As Dr. Tain put it, results that would be considered strong at any age. Melissa had gone very still. "The documentation has been filed with my estate records," Iris said. "Ruth has a copy. I have a copy. My GP has a copy." She looked around the table in the pleasant, unhurried way of a woman who has said exactly what she intended to say and has no need to repeat herself. Owen had been listening to all of this with the focused attention he brings to a problem he hasn't encountered before. He was doing what intelligent young people do when the information coming in doesn't match the model they've been operating with. He was recalculating. "Nan," he said carefully, "why is this happening now? The money, the solicitor, the cognitive." He stopped. He looked at his parents, then back at Iris. "What's going on?" Nobody answered him immediately. "What was Carolyn Steed doing at my graduation dinner?" The question landed in the middle of the table, and nobody touched it. Owen looked at Brendan. "Dad, why was there a financial administrator at my graduation dinner?" Brendan looked at his son, and I watched him make the decision that I had been hoping he would make. He did not defer to Melissa. He did not look at the table. He looked at his son and he told him the truth. Not all of it, not every detail, but enough. Enough to account for what had happened and why Iris had done what she had done. Owen listened without interrupting. He is a deliberate young man. He processes before he speaks. When Brendan finished, Owen was quiet for perhaps 30 seconds, which in a room that charged feels considerably longer. Then he looked at his mother. "You used my graduation," he said. Melissa started to speak. "You used my graduation dinner," Owen said again. The same flat, even tone, the tone of someone confirming a fact they would prefer not to confirm. "To bring in a professional to build a case against Nan, without telling me, without telling Nan, without telling Dad." "It sounds like," Owen, Melissa said. He looked at her for a long moment. "I know you didn't, sweetheart," Iris said, "and you have nothing to apologize for." Brendan and Melissa left at 5:30. Owen stayed. "I did the dishes because I have done the dishes at that table since I was 12 years old, and some things are not obligations but simply what you do." Owen sat with Iris at the kitchen table, and they talked. I listened from the sink. They talked the way people talk when the artificial layer has been peeled off and what's underneath is actual. Owen told Iris he had thought something was strange about the dinner even at the time. A woman he didn't recognize who asked him questions about his degree and then about his family situation that felt, in retrospect, too purposeful to be casual. He had filed it away. He said he supposed he hadn't wanted to think too hard about what it might mean. "You were right not to panic," Iris told him. "Information without context is just noise. The thing is to hold on to it until the context arrives." He laughed a little at that. She has always been able to make him laugh when no one else could. That has been true since he was 4 years old. "Is it actually sorted?" he asked. "The legal stuff. Are you actually okay?" "I am better than okay," she said. "I have a solicitor who is smarter than anyone who was planning to work against me. I have a cognitive report that removes the premise of the entire exercise. And I have this house, which has been mine for 50 years, and which is going to remain mine for as long as I choose to stay in it, which I intend to be a very long time." He patted her hand. "That's good, Nan. That's really good." She patted his back. "Go and thank your grandfather for the money," she said. "He is standing at my sink, pretending he can't hear us." I turned around. Owen was grinning. "Cheers, Granddad," he said. "Don't waste it," I told him. "Build something good." He nodded, and I believed him. I have always been able to tell when a young person means what they say and when they are performing meaning. Owen Whitmore has never once performed a single thing in his life. I walked out to my car at 7 o'clock. The Petone evening was cold and clear, the kind of autumn night where the air off the harbor has a sharp, clean edge to it. Owen walked out with me, hands in the pockets of his university hoodie. "She's something else, isn't she?" he said. "She always has been," I said. "We just keep underestimating that." He scuffed the toe of his shoe against the drive. "Is Dad going to be all right?" I thought about my son, about the man he was before whatever this became. and about the work that would be required to find his way back to that. "He's going to have some difficult weeks," I said. "But he's not a bad man. He's a decent man who got turned around. That's recoverable, if he's willing to do the work of recovering it." Owen nodded. He looked at the lit window of the kitchen, at Iris's silhouette moving past it, calm and unhurried. "What about Mum?" he said. I looked at my grandson for a moment. "That," I said, "is genuinely above my pay grade." He almost smiled at that. "Fair enough," he said. I drove back to Lower Hutt on a cold, clear Wellington night, with the radio off and the motorway quiet, and the particular feeling that comes when you have watched something be set right by a person who never raised her voice or made a threat or asked anyone for credit. It is a quieter satisfaction than you expect. Less noise, more weight. The specific steadiness of watching someone get comprehensively wrong the person they decided to underestimate. My mother texted me at 8:45. I glanced at it at the lights on the Hutt Road. Lovely afternoon. The lamb came out well. I sat at the light and typed back. "You took them completely apart with a roast and good china. Dad would have enjoyed every second of it. 3 dots. Then, he always did love a Sunday roast. Good night, Gerald." I drove the rest of the way home thinking about my father, who had spent 40 years building something careful and true, and about the woman he had trusted it to, and about the people who had looked at that trust and seen only leverage. They had looked at Iris Whitmore and seen a sweet, elderly woman alone in an old house in Petone. They had seen frailty. They had seen an opening. What they had not seen was 79 years of paying attention. What they had not seen was the green notebooks in the top drawer. What they had not seen was the solicitor's card kept since 2023. The patient accumulation of relevant information, the cognitive assessment booked before anyone thought to suggest it, the estate restructured before the first meeting had even been scheduled. They had not seen her. And that, in the end, was the only mistake that mattered. There is something worth understanding in what this family went through, and it is this. Age is not a diminishment. The people we love who are older than us are not problems to be managed. They are people who have spent decades developing exactly the kinds of strengths that are hardest to see from the outside. Patience, foresight, the capacity to hold information quietly until the right moment, the willingness to act without an audience. When we stop looking at the people who raised us, we stop seeing what is actually there, and we become vulnerable to being surprised by it. Or worse, we become the person who mistakes their dignity for weakness. Iris Whitmore was never at risk. She was 3 moves ahead before the game began. The people who thought they were protecting her were the only ones in that story who were ever, and the young man who walked away from that Sunday table with an envelope and a clearer understanding of his family, he carried something more valuable than either. He carried the example of a woman who met a serious threat with competence, composure, and not one single wasted word. That is an education you cannot buy. And it is one that lasts.